Hello, Panthers and friends. Today is our first lesson in basic drawing, and I'm really starting from a level that is a little bit higher than what you've gotten in the classroom. Most of you have heard me talk about shape and value and form and various elements of art. Now we're going to learn to draw those different things. If you're in the 4th grade, then you got one of these drawing pads in the spring semester. They're recycled, from students in the past. And if you are not in the 4th grade and would like to have one of these, if you are a FLS student, you may stop by the school and pick up one of these drawing pads. They're all used. They have somebody else's name up here, but there's quite a bit of high quality paper in them, and you're welcome to use them. This old one here I've had for a very long time. In fact, I was just looking through it, and there's some sketches in here of various set pieces that I've done, and you probably recognize, like this is a painting that goes on a flat, and this is another one that we've used in some different Bible stories, and then this one here. So I always make a sketch of whatever I want to paint so I can kind of get an idea of where things are going to be and make sure that everything is accurate. Okay, for our lesson today, we are going to do on an empty page here, we're going to learn how to shade some shapes. You may have, depending on what grade you are in, you may have heard me talk about value. Go ahead and write the word value on your paper. Value is the lightness or darkness of a color. And in this case, it's going to be just your basic pencil. I forgot to talk about equipment. For this class, you don't need anything fancy. I would like you to have some good quality drawing paper. That's why I'm offering to let you stop by and get these drawing pads. But you could just have a plain old pencil that you do math with. This one's fun because it says I Love Band on it. Got it at the local music store. Any kind of an eraser. This is just an old eraser. Gosh, I don't know how many years I've had it. Any kind of eraser will do just fine for this. Okay, back to our lesson here. Value is the lightness and darkness of a color. So we're going to make a value scale. And a scale, as you can imagine, is going from light to dark. So I'd like you to draw a little, it doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of draw a long rectangle like that, divide it in half, and then divide it in half again. You don't need your ruler or anything. This is just, we're going to do a very basic value scale. Then after you get that drawn, then put numbers under here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to shade using our pencil, and we're going to make 4 levels of value. The first one is really easy because we're just going to leave that white. Then the second level of value, notice how I'm holding my pencil, and we're just going to do very lightly, just a little bit of light gray here. So we'll call that level 2. And this one is going to be lighter or darker, can you imagine? That's right, it's darker. So you push a little bit harder, but remember, don't push so hard that you break your lead. Go over it and over it. We call that glazing. Get it nice and dark, but not completely, totally dark. And do your best to kind of get it even. Mine looks kind of mottled there. And then number 4 is going to be pretty dark. I'm not using any more pressure than I did on number 3, but I'm going to go over it several more times so that it gets nice and dark. I'm going to glaze over it. You've probably heard me use that term before. Have you had a glazed donut? Yum. That's where they put the sugar on top of the donut. This is a similar thing. We're putting a little bit of darkness on top. Okay, so you should have 4 levels of value right there. It's a good place to start. The first shape we're going to do is we're going to make a cube. So you know how I like to do reference dots. So put a dot here and one here, and then make it kind of like a diamond. Halfway in between, you don't need to measure anything, just approximate it. And put a dot here, and then halfway in between down here. So we've almost got a diamond. It looks like the middle of the Arkansas flag. That's kind of cool. So we're going to connect the dots next. And once again, you don't need your ruler, just kind of sketch. Notice how I'm sketching lightly. We've talked about this in the classroom. If you draw a line really dark, then it's hard to erase. If you sketch a line, then it's real easy to go back and erase what you don't want. And this line here that's drawn too dark, look, it doesn't want to erase at all. So always sketch very, very lightly. And I make my reference dots a little darker than you probably should, just to make sure you can see them in the video. And go ahead and connect these last two. Now it looks like we're drawing an Arkansas flag. Okay, let's make the front side of our cube. And we're going to need to kind of measure this. So just draw a line down to about here, and then take your pencil and kind of guess. You see, it comes to about there. So you're going to want to make this side about the same length. It doesn't have to be perfect, just about, because it'll look out of proportion if we don't have it very similar. Let's see, where was that? Here to there. Yeah, see, it looks kind of weird, but it's, now if these two are straight across, then you're probably pretty close to right. Okay, we're going to do the bottom here of our cube. Remember to sketch very lightly. You can always go back and erase lines that you don't like. Now we get to do our shading. We're going to make this cube look like the light is coming from, okay, let's make it come from this direction. Very lightly sketch an arrow here, and then you can erase that later if you want to, just to remind yourself what direction our light is coming from. So if the light is coming from this direction, the darkest side of our cube is going to be opposite of where the light is. So let's go ahead and do value level 4 on that. And when you have a larger area, it's good to go, see I'm going in tight little circles. Well, when you do a lot of shading with a pencil like this, you wind up with a very sharp point, which is kind of cool if you want to get into small areas or do something very detailed. So the way I normally do it is I get the middle of it and then kind of prop my pencil up a little bit, very gently sketch in the, shade in the edges. Remember not to do it too hard. We're trying to get this darkest value here, so I'm going to have to do what? It isn't quite dark enough. What was that G word we talked about? We're going to need to glaze it with another layer of this graphite that's in this pencil. There we go, getting that nice and dark. And for this lesson, that doesn't need to be perfect. You know, it doesn't need to be shaded exactly the same value all the way across, just so it's nice and dark. So if this is going to be the darkest, then see if you can imagine whether this top side or this side here would be the lightest. Light's coming from this way. I would imagine that this would be the lightest value. So let's leave that at number 1 and then make this about a 2 or a 3 here. So we've already got some shading. Makes it look a little bit more three-dimensional. Now we're going to do one more thing to really make this look like it's sitting somewhere. We're going to do what we call a cast shadow. So you can, right here where the shadow would be, because remember the light's coming from that direction, and then just kind of fade it out. You don't want your cast shadow to be a big shape. You just want it to be kind of faded out. And notice, let's see, what have I got here? I got my coffee cup here. Notice when you have a shadow, see how it kind of fades out there? Only when it's really, really, really close, which you may not be able to see in the video, do you get a harsher line. So we're going to have it a little bit harsher line here, and then fade out as this part is making the shade as it gets further away. And your cast shadow right up next to the subject needs to be relatively dark. So I'm going to make this pretty dark right here, going in tight little circles using the side of my lid, and then fading out as we get further away from the subject. So there you go. There's your first shape that you have done the shading on using your value scale. I'm going to go back and lighten my reference dots a little bit. There we go, that's cool. That turned out looking really good. Okay, the next shape we're going to do is we're going to turn a circle into a ball. Now it's a little bit more complicated, and you can find something to draw around if you want, or you can just kind of sketch a circle. I mean, if it's like some of the balls I've got out there in the pool, they're not perfectly round anyway. They're kind of squishy on one side. because of the way they float around in the pool. So just sketch away till you get pretty close to what a circle would look like. A little bit broader on this side. And then you're going to go back and erase what you don't want. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, we're getting there. Then refine your edges a little bit more. This is looking more like an egg. Maybe I'll draw an egg sitting on its point. There we go. Now we're getting close to having a circle. Okay, we're going to turn this circle into a ball. Let me refine the edges just a little bit more. Boy, I'm hearing a little bit of thunder out there. I'm glad it held off on the rain until I got finished with my bike ride this morning. Boy, it was nice. I like to get up pretty early. I think I was on the road by 6:30 this morning. It's so nice and cool and so little traffic. There's not a bunch of people out there trying to run me down. Okay, that's good enough. That'll work for a circle. So, once again, let's keep our light source the same for consistency. Go ahead and put your little arrow there. But let's imagine that the light, instead of coming from this direction, is kind of coming from this direction. So we would have kind of a hot spot here in the middle. So very, very lightly draw another circle about right there. That's going to be the reflected highlight. And then the rest of the shading would go on here. So here we go. We're going to use, this is level 1 right here. So we're going to use 2, 3, and 4, but we're going to make it gradiated. Let's do a little exercise. You could take your pencil and hold it like this if you would, and then just start scribbling very, very lightly. Make a line like this. You may have done this in the class depending on what grade you're in. And as I get further away, I'm getting darker and darker. And if I want it really dark, I'm going to go back and glaze it. See how I'm doing that? So I've got a gradiated value scale here that goes from 1, which is here where there's nothing, all the way through the 4 levels of value that we've talked about. That's the technique we're going to use on this side of the ball. So here we go. Very carefully. Now we don't want to start up here. Let's start down here a bit because I'll show you why in a few minutes. Go ahead and get our value level 4 here. Remember to go in tight little circles right along the edge. Be very careful. Now one mistake I see students make in the classroom, and maybe we can talk about that here and avoid that. You do want different levels of value, but you don't want stripes. Like if I would jump from level 4 to level 3 all of a sudden, that doesn't look gradiated. It looks like maybe there's a hard edge there on the ball. So what we need to do is blend the two by just going back and forth over them. So I get from darker to a little bit lighter, and then come all the way around. And we need to come down here with our value 4, and then blending up into value 3. Now I'm going to think about value 2 here, which is going to be pretty light. So I'm going to get this laid in, and then I'm going to go back and make it a little bit more gradual, a bit more gradiated. Okay, there's our reflected highlight there. But see how it's kind of harsh right there? Let's blend that a little bit. And if you get too much on there, that's one thing that's so cool about pencil is you can just take your eraser. Like if I accidentally made a little goober there, I could just gently take my eraser and just lift out that color you don't want and then lay it back in the way you wanted it. Okay, take just a couple of minutes to make this nice and gradiated. Now you see I've got a circle here where my reflected highlight is. So we're going to clean that up a little bit. Almost too much there. I think I'm going to take my darker value a little bit bigger. Okay, there we go. Okay guys, we're back for the second half of our drawing lesson number 1. I ran out of space on the iPad that I'm using, so it just quit videoing in the middle, so I had to go back and delete a bunch of stuff, and here we go. Notice I've got a blue, this is an apron that I used to paint in, the back side of it, the front side of it's pretty messy. But you notice this blue here. Some of my videos have had this kind of yellowish pinkish tint, and I really didn't like it. So I figured out what is going to counteract that is to put blue on here. Color theory, when it deals with light, is completely different than when it deals with paint. That's another lesson entirely. So let's finish up our ball here, our circle that we turned into a ball. The only thing left to do on this is to do our cast shadow. So remember, we're going to have about a value, between a value 3 and 4, right up next to the subject. And remember to fade it out gently, tight little circles. There we go, and leave a little bit of a reflected highlight under there so that we have some separation between the subject and the table. You don't need too much. A little bit more back behind here, because since our reflected highlight is here, the light's kind of coming from this direction. So there we go, with a little bit of a cast shadow. And this line that I used to draw my circle, it's a little bit harsher than I want it to be. So let's erase some of that, make that a little bit softer. And then also the inside of your reflected highlight, if it's kind of gotten smudged, take your eraser and erase the lines that you drew to define the shape. And then there you go, got our circle that is turned into a ball. I think I'll make this just a tiny bit darker. There we go. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a ribbon. Just a piece of ribbon standing on its edge. So come down here on the bottom part of your paper, and very gently, we're going to kind of make a little snaky thing here. Yours doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but it could be similar. Just a kind of a little windy piece of ribbon that is going to be standing on its edge. Okay, when you get that part done, then you're going to have to do the sides of it, kind of like we did with our cube up here. So let's make it about that wide. And remember how we measured so we could approximate? Let's do the same thing here. So you need your vertical lines. Now this one is hidden behind, so you don't need to worry about how long it is. Okay, let's measure again to get this one here. Now about there, and about there on this one. And then this edge is going to be hidden. This edge is going to be hidden. I don't know if that one is or not. I don't want to take a chance. Let's measure it and see. Yeah, it looks like this one's going to be hidden too. There we go. Now just for fun, let's make a little kind of pointy. You know how sometimes ribbons are cut like this? Come out a little bit of ways, and then find the approximate center there, and then just draw your line like that and like that. Oops, I forgot to have you make the bottom parallel line. See how this is parallel to this? And then we'll do this one, nice rounded edge here. Make it parallel to this line up here. And that edge is hidden. The nice rounded edge, and you've got to kind of come around and down. It's real important, around and down to kind of a point. Now let's do our little V shape on this side. Find the center, come in this way and that way. Then we can go back and erase this line that was our edge and any reference dots you don't like. There we go, there's our piece of ribbon. Now let's make it three-dimensional by doing some shading. Okay, have about a level 4 here of value. And then this is going to fade out quite a bit more quickly because it's kind of a tight little corner. So this took a ways to fade from our dark to our light. For this ribbon down here, fade it pretty quickly, and then make the whole ribbon about a level 2 or a little lighter just to give it some substance. Not doing a whole lot here. inside of here. All of these little curves need to have some shading on them, even though our light source is coming from here, to give it some shape. Okay, a little bit here. This is going to be pretty dark here because it is in shadow. But then fade out real quickly. A little bit in here. And fade out quickly. I'm redefining my edge there a little bit. And then fade quickly. Remember your tight little circles that we use. And then the whole thing needs to have just a little bit of shading for a little bit of substance. Even though the light is coming from this direction, it's kind of coming from behind. So we need a little bit here to define this little curve. Not too much. And that is all the little areas that we need to shade. I want to give just a little bit of texture to the whole piece of ribbon here. That turned out looking pretty cool. So there you go. You can go back and see I've got it kind of harsh right there. Erase anything you don't like. Some of these areas that are they're definitely in deeper shadow, you might want to darken some, but don't forget to fade them out into the rest of it. Fade them out. Okay, this is the end of lesson number 1. For lesson number 2, we're going to draw some different shapes and do some more complex shading. We're going to draw a cone, and we're going to draw a pyramid, and I'll show you some even more levels of value. Okay, remember to praise God, stay inspired, and keep making art.